I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Monday, April 1st. A woman denied the opportunity to run for council because she did not reside within her First Nations boundaries has now heard from Canada's highest court. With more on Cindy Dickson's 5-year fight, Sarah Connors.
The Supreme Court of Canada has upheld the Vuntut Gwitchin First Nations requirement that elected officials must reside in the community. The First Nation requires all elected officials to live in the community of Old Crow or move there in 14 days. Vuntut citizen Cindy Dickson ran for council in 2018, but she was barred from running because she lives in Whitehorse, 800 kilometers away. She took the matter to court, arguing her equality rights are guaranteed in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Vuntut Gwitchin argued as a self-governing First Nation, it has its own constitution and the Charter doesn't apply to them, and it had a right to govern itself in order to preserve its culture and traditions. The Supreme Court ultimately found the Charter does apply to the First Nation, but it also found the First Nation's residency requirement infringed upon Dickson's right to equality. However, Dickson lost because the court found Section 25 of the Charter, which upholds the collective rights of Indigenous people, ultimately prevails over an individual's equality rights. Chief Pauline Frost welcomes the decision.
It's always our intention to protect Aboriginal rights and treaty rights and inherent rights of our community. And we are a self-governing Indigenous community. And our seat of our government is on our settlement area. It always has been historically.
She hopes the outcome doesn't dissuade other citizens from running in the future.
We will do our utmost to ensure that they're relocated in due course and that they're supported when they relocate and that we find them appropriate accommodations, that we don't want this to ever be seen as a restrictive process.
Dickson's lawyer said in a statement they're pleased the court confirmed Vuntut Gwitchin people have charter rights in relation to their Indigenous government, among other things. However, they're disappointed with the result. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
A federal court has ordered Ottawa to revisit its self-government deal with the Métis Nation of Alberta. Signed with the MNA back in 2019, the agreement is one of 3 making up part of Bill C-53, the proposed legislation, which also includes the Métis Nations of Saskatchewan and Ontario. The bill currently sits at the committee stage in Parliament. But according to Justice Sébastien Gramont, the deal with the MNA is too broad and did not consult the Métis Settlements General Council in Alberta or the Fort Mackay First Nation. Consultation, Gramont has ruled, must happen for the bill to proceed. To Yellowknife, a city whose residents had a lot to say about the handling of the 2023 wildfire evacuation. With more from a recent public engagement session, Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs.
The Yellowknife multiplex is empty now, but in a matter of minutes, 200 people were there to listen and share opinions about the 2023's unprecedented wildfire season, which led to the evacuation of multiple communities, including the 20,000-person territorial capital of Yellowknife. Media was not allowed to film the public engagement session, but it is part of an independent response review led by KPMG, a global accounting firm contracted by the city. They heard feedback about mitigation and preparedness, evacuation response, re-entry, and recovery. A big theme was poor communication. Government told residents up until the last minute they would just shelter in place and wouldn't have to evacuate.
Everybody that spoke up there tonight, their biggest concern was the lack of communication on all levels of government, all levels of evacuation, right from leaving to returning to the evacuees. Like for me staying here and working, I knew what communication I had within the volunteer group. But then you hear from the people that were down south that were in different evacuation centers what the struggles went through in that.
Not everyone left during evacuation. Scott Yulee was one of 150 volunteers who stayed behind. Volunteers helped Fire Smart. They fed firefighters, checked on residents' dwellings, and assisted contractors helping to defend the city. Folks also expressed frustration in the government's lack of wildfire defenses, not investing in fire breaks and sprinklers until the fire was at their doorsteps. Many spoke of disparities in their experiences during evacuation. Elders and young families who left by plane were subjected to long lineups, which lasted hours, if not days. Some stayed in hotels, while others slept in evacuation centers peppered across Alberta, relying on meal vouchers.
They could have used the Red Cross from the beginning. I spoke on the homelessness because we had over 369 homeless. When they were evacuated, they were dispersed in different cities.
Cleetjo resident Georgina Frankie says she hopes the review highlights how vulnerable populations were left out of planning, some of whom never did make it back to Yellowknife after evacuation.
There's 20,000 people. Why do we have over 300 Indigenous homeless?
The city says they hope to apply lessons learned from last year into their plans for this wildfire season. The report will be released publicly in June. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
And finally, the Yukon Child and Youth Advocate Office and the Yukon First Nation Education Directorate have together launched a review of systemic discrimination and racism in the territory's education system. To be based on an online survey, along with direct discussions with students and family, it's expected to be completed by December, with a report detailing students' experiences to be made public in 2025. Melanie Bennett heads the Yukon First Nation Education Directorate. She says the findings will help shape a better education system.
The systems, policies, the processes, procedures, and legislation perpetuate systemic racism. And it's, for our Indigenous children, we have to have those conversations, and we have to figure out from them what we can do to change that system.
And that's your APTN News Brief for Monday, April 1st. I'm Rick Harp.